Hey guys, Bix Weir, roadtour.com. We got Andy Schectman on the line from Miles Franklin. Andy, how are you, my friend?
Bix, I couldn't be better. It's a crazy time for sure, but I'm doing well hanging in there. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you too. Happy
Hey,
New Year, by the way.
yeah, you too. I got a question for you that I was
Yeah.
thinking the other day. If you were to tell me in 1980, when silver was hitting 50 bucks, that, what is that, 40 years later, with the amount of money they've printed, the amount of awareness that's been circulated about the silver manipulation, the amount of everything going on in our political world, we're on the brink of losing our country, that silver would be one half the value that it was in 1980. I would have said you were the craziest human being on the planet, but you would have been right.
Yeah, well, especially in context with everything else. I mean, when you talk about just what $100 was in 1980 versus what it is now. I was 10 years old in 1980. I remember going to movie theaters for $2 a movie. I remember when the first Star Wars came out in 1977, there was a movie theater right up the street from my house, and $2 a pop, go to the movie theater, and candy bars were 25 cents, and a gallon of gas was a buck 30. So look, the bottom line is that everything has increased in value, and which leads me to believe that silver is the most undervalued asset on the planet. Even gold is 3 times what it was nearly, or 2.5 times what it was in 1980. Silver, on the other hand, is really, it's a gift, it's a subsidy. And the manipulators who have held down the price, I would argue, to reposition themselves and to corner the physical market, well, they've given us a gift and a subsidy. But the interesting thing about it is that, we're all taught when we're little kids, Bix, to buy low and sell high. People seem to like to buy high after the confirmation has already been made. You gotta trust your intuition. You gotta trust your gut. And people like you who are helping us see the truth and trust our gut should be commended. I don't know of any other asset on the planet that offers quite the potential that silver does, not only from all of its wonderful fundamentals, but especially from what you're saying right there as an asset that's trading at half of its 1980 value. Yeah, that's a good point.
And the silver gold ratio is completely out of whack, and has been, though. It has been since the creation of the COMEX back in the early 70s is when this version, the electronic version of the COMEX, started. And I find it very interesting that the CFTC, in all their glory, has gone. They were brought into being about 1974. From the bottom of my gut, know that the CFTC was not brought on to be a regulator of the commodity markets. The CFTC was brought on to hide the ongoing manipulation, the official manipulation of the commodity prices. And we can see that, I mean, even the JP Morgan ruling, the largest ruling that CFTC is ever given to anybody by far, $982 million fine to JP Morgan, who we had been screaming for 10 years that they were the manipulator. Ted Butler nailed them many times. They had 3 investigations ongoing, and then the DOJ comes in and says, yeah, for the last 10 years, you guys have been rigging the silver market. We got you up on RICO charges. And all that starts coming down, and then they slap them with this fine. God knows how much money they've made. From Ted's work, they've got about 1 billion ounces of physical. Most of it might be leased out already, but where does the CFTC get off slapping this fine on JP Morgan and then still having them have the #1 COMEX warehouse inventories? About half of the COMEX warehouse is all in the JP Morgan vault, and be the custodian of all the SLV silver. I mean, you've got the #1 criminal you finally busted, and yet you allow them to be the #1 player in all these different markets. More proof that the CFTC is not useless, but they're useful in hiding the manipulation.
Well, I would answer your first. Let me talk about just briefly about the gold to silver ratio. We've been talking about that ad nauseum for a long time. I was begging people in 2010, when the ratio was 85 to 1, to switch from gold to silver. And by 2011, 7 months later, it was 37 to 1 at $50 silver and $1,920 gold. When it hit 125 to 1 this last March, I was pleading with people to switch their gold to silver. And had they done that right now at roughly 70 to 1, they're already 80% of the way to doubling what they would have otherwise if they switched back into gold. I think that ratio will get far lower, as I was speaking with Keith Neumeyer not too long ago, and he told me that what is coming out of the ground across the entire silver mining industry, across the entire globe, is 8 to 1. And I said to him, I said, Keith, you know, this is a guy that's the CEO of First Majestic, one of the biggest silver mining companies in the world. I said, Keith, how long can it continue to be sold at 70 to 1 when you're all pulling it out of the ground at 8 to 1? And I'll remind your listeners that silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal. Epithermal means it's found very close to the surface. And so the big deposits were found many, many decades ago, long before the advent of advanced imagery. So the big deposits were found long ago, and you have to dig further and explore farther. And when you see an 8 to 1 ratio and a 72 to 1 real price, I said, Keith, how long does that stay? He says, well, Andy, you tell me. How long can we pull it out of the ground as an industry at 8 to 1, only to sell it at 72 to 1 or better? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, it has to regress to its mean. And when we talk about the CFTC and the governing bodies allowing this type of overt manipulation to happen with what amounts to basically a slap on the wrist, I think I heard JP Morgan booked $1 billion in profit on their precious metals desk, or somewhere in that neighborhood, in 2020, while still paying $800 million or $920 million in a fine. So they walked away with, you know, $80 million after paying their fine. No big deal. I think you have to take a step back and ask yourself, how is that even possible? And the only answer that ever has made sense to me is that they're running cover for one of two entities. Either this silver is being accumulated on behalf of the US government or a broker deal with the Chinese government, one or the other. There is no other explanation how they can completely violate the antitrust law and completely violate everything that the COMEX and the CFTC supposedly stands for, while simply being slapped on the wrist when people like Martha Stewart go to jail for years for insider trading. None of it makes sense. And I guess, you know, Occam's razor has to come into play here, where the most obvious logical answer is the right one. They're running cover either for the US government, most likely, or for the Chinese government in a broker deal for them not to dump their treasuries. The bottom line is the CFTC has not done the United States public and the people who own precious metals or the silver and gold producers one bit of good. If anything, they're only incentivizing these people to continue rigging the market, because they know that, heck, we'll just get a slap on the wrist, and after our profits are factored into the equation, we'll still walk away with a profit for the year, even after paying the largest fine in the history of the CFTC. It's a sham, Bix.
Perfectly said. Well said. And something I want to touch on, the mine silver coming out of the ground. I mean, it takes hundreds of thousands of people, billions of dollars to get this silver out of the ground. Companies, right. It takes shareholders, it takes banks are involved with financing equipment. And I hear they're going to pull out less than 800 million this year because of the COVID shutdowns and all that. Tell me how something like this happens. On Friday, on the COMEX, somebody dumped 1.1 billion ounces on the COMEX to slam the price down. How can a regulator with a straight face come out and say, oh yeah, this is normal trading. This is normal for any free market in any universe, some bizarro universe maybe.
It doesn't happen. And that right there is the type of information, and I say this not to kiss your butt, that's the kind of information that people need to listen to you for, because you can scour the universe of mainstream media. You won't find anything even remotely close to that. You'll only find negative, bearish rhetoric as to why we shouldn't own precious metals. You know, manipulation and misdirection is a very common theme. I often talk about the book, The Art of War, which is the no-look pass. It's misdirecting the public through price and through rhetoric. It's a very common theme. The book, The Art of War, is taught in every major business school and every law school. It's mandatory reading at CIA and West Point. It's taught on how to misdirect the people from where you're trying to go yourself. And so the bottom line is, when we talk about annual mine production, typically last few years has been about 800 million. 2 years ago, we were over 200 million shortfall. This year, 2020 rather, with a mitigated industrial output due to COVID, due to the mines being shut down, due to the business being shut down, we were still over 320 million ounces shortfall. And so when you look at a 1.1 billion ounce drop at the open, which is just ridiculous. I mean, if any of you ever have a broker and you call them and say, I need to sell $1 million at the open, more often than not, they'll tell you, well, let's just spread that out a little bit to get you the best price over a couple of hours or over a couple of days. Anyone who drops it in thinly traded markets, and in particular, this happened right at like the PM fix in London, right as we're heading into New York, when there really is no trading, specifically to affect a perception of reality. It's done specifically to knock the wind out of the sails, if you will. But bottom line is, a whole year's worth of physical demand dropped at the open is absolutely asinine. It's ridiculous. No one would ever do it if they're trying to maximize what their return would be. But this goes back to my point. You know, this is no more egregious than anything we've seen over the past couple of years. How the CFT allows it, it's ridiculous. And the only way they could allow it is to have been told, just like Chris Marcus talks about in his interview with Bart Chilton, when Bart said, when he went to his supervisors, they said, listen, this is a political deal. This is bigger than us. Let it go. More or less is what he was told at the time. And so they're letting it go for a reason. Here again, what's the reason? And I would argue that it is, they are trying to accumulate the physical metal and they are misdirecting it on price. As that happened, Bix, and as that happened when 1.1 billion ounces were dropped at the open, we didn't sell 1 ounce of silver. I mean, everyone's buying from us. No one is selling to us. So it is a drive-by shooting. It is completely and totally manipulative and completely and totally disingenuous on behalf of the regulators. I look at it as a subsidy. It's easy to say. It's hard to let it sink in, especially if you own silver. But it reeks of desperation. It reeks that that's where we're going. And now let's take a step back and look at what that really means in terms of 2021. We had a roughly 7 or 8% decrease in industrial demand last year because everything was shut down, yet we're still 330 million ounces shortfall. What happens this year when we have, you know, the industrials supposedly get back on and the mints and the mines start producing again? And now you have, you know, the need for silver in a Green New Deal with Biden and the move away from fossil fuels into solar panels and into wind powered, all these things, including battery powered, that need silver. And now the new rise of biocide, the coating that you'll see on cell phones and on countertops and on everything that has silver in it in order to kill bacteria and virus. The need for silver is ever increasing. The metal itself is found in a fashion that lends itself to big deposits being found long ago. So we're already running deficits. Running a deficit when demand is down, what happens when demand picks up? So I look at 2021 as the year for silver on many levels. In particular, it's one of the only asset classes in the world that is bracketed on both sides between industry and between finance. And so I think you'll see, on one hand, the value hunting hedge funds who are battling for pennies, you know, trading equities, looking at silver at 50% of its all-time high in 1980. Well, hell, that's a damn good value. You could see them jumping on only to spur on the industrial demand in companies like Tesla and companies like Apple and Samsung, who need silver to produce their product in a depleted situation and one that is running constant deficits. What does that portray for silver? I think this is the year for silver as industrials and as the financials battle each other for, you know, for different reasons, but for the same reason. And so I the fact that they're able to dump 1.1 billion ounces at the open just reeks of desperation, reeks of a drive-by shooting. And I think, it's foretelling as to what we can expect going forward. It obviously makes you think that they're afraid to let the price go much higher very quickly. In the end, it won't change a damn thing. It really won't.
I want to get to what we've heard so many great stories about why we should own silver over the past 20 years that I've been looking at it. And they're all absolutely relevant and pertinent. The manipulation with computers and derivatives is the only thing stopping price. That's the only reason the price hasn't gone into the thousands by now, is the manipulation by the official manipulation and the unofficial manipulation by the banksters and the government. Okay, we know all that. We have hit a point in time, I believe, where we're going to see a lot of market dislocation, a lot of markets shutting down, because all these assets are being rehypothecated, meaning they're selling stuff they don't have. We've seen it in silver for a long time, but it's also happening in the bond market, the stock market, the foreign exchange markets. Everything is completely out of control, including the Federal Reserve System. Now is the time, and I've been screaming about it. If you don't have it in your own possession, you don't have anything. I don't care who holds it for you. The reality is, if we do have a banking collapse of a too big to fail bank, all bets are off on getting your silver from wherever it is. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't great people storing silver for other customers. If they have an option, yeah, they probably would try their best to get you your silver. But sometimes you don't have an option. Sometimes the government comes in, especially foreign held stuff. People tell me, oh, my silver's fine. It's held in Switzerland. You don't think the Swiss people are going to say, oh my God, we have no money. Everything's been shut down. Every government's going to nationalize these big hoards of silver and gold. In the kind of the dark scenario of a too big to fail bank failing, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citibank, one of those banks that you can't really bail out because they're so entwined in derivatives, and it would take a congressional act, and to go to Congress to get a bailout is pretty much impossible these days. Congress can't agree to tie their shoes. Depends on what Congress we have coming forward. But any way you look at it, you got to get your metals. You got to get all your assets in your own possession yesterday, not tomorrow, is my take. What can our customers do, the road to Ruta people do, to get physical metal in their own possession as fast as possible right now?
Absolutely. And I'm going to answer that question. I want to answer it 2 or 3 different ways. First of all, I want to tell you that as far as your customers are concerned, all they need to do is send me an email, and I'll make sure that they get immediate delivery. We have great inventory. I'll make sure they get the best price. That's something that I've always promised you and your listeners. And I will make sure that either myself or brokers that I have personally trained who have been with me for a very long time will talk with your people, and they'll get the best service as promptly as possible. And we will only sell them stuff that is in stock. If it's not in stock, they'll be made aware of it. Right now, I have a really good inventory. I have really, really tried hard to continue to fill the coffers as much as possible, going out on lines of credit, just to make sure that I have what is needed to fill demand. So that, first and foremost, should not be a concern for you or your listeners. That is priority number 1. Bix, I played sports my whole life. In many ways, it's defined me, who I am, from baseball up to college days, softball into my 40s all around the country, basketball 4 days a week. Sports defined my life. And for those of you that have ever played sports or watched sports, deeply into watching sports, if you get really in tune to what you're doing, really in tune to playing a game, or in business, really in tune to your business. I've been doing this for 30 years. You get to a point where something happens, a turn of events, an error by the first baseman, a missed tackle by the linebacker. Something happens and you feel a change. You feel something snaps, and you can't quite articulate it, but you know that things are going to get funky real quick. Things are going to change. And that's how I feel right now about business. Something's about to happen. Something is about to pop. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I'll simply say to you, I have this gut feeling after 30 years of being in this industry, that things are rapidly changing. Having physical possession, getting it out of the way is certainly very important. But there are two events over the last 4 years that have really led me to feel what you're saying is very, very, very true and very, very important. Now, I will caveat this by saying some people can't hold it. And so if you are going to have it stored, make sure you choose a really good third-party entity, if that's the best you can do. Having it in physical possession is really important. But two things happened over the last 4 years that kind of given me this itch, like, yeah, there was just an error, and now the bases are going to empty. Something's going to happen here. And here's what it is. First of all, in 2017, out of nowhere, the German Bundesbank declares we want all our gold back. It was very strange because at the time, the central banks were net sellers of gold. But within 6 months of that happening, the Bank of Austria, the Dutch National Bank, the Bank of Poland, the Bank of Hungary, all of these banks start saying the same thing, give us back our gold. And what was maybe the most illuminating thing in 2020 to me was the rise of the others on the COMEX market. Right now, I think they have 10,000 contracts long in silver. This is a group of people who I would argue are either friends with or the same people with the people that are making the rules, the central bankers. These are people that are pulling off as much gold off the exchange in gold and silver every single month as we see typically in a year. Over 330 million ounces of silver last year, I believe was the number that they pulled off. They took delivery of, and now they're long over 10,000 contracts at 5,000 ounces a pop. So the point of it is that people in the know are doing the exact same thing. The biggest money, the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed, and influential traders on the globe. The others, well, they're sovereign wealth funds and family offices. These are the wealthiest, most influential citizens on the planet. And they're taking all their metal off, taking it away from the COMEX, taking delivery. So I think it's really, really important. I would say to you, something is itching inside that's telling me something is coming, something is happening. You can feel it, you can see it. You can see how rapidly things keep happening. And things that would have been considered unimaginable, like in 2008. In 2008, when the shit hit the fan, they raised the Fed put $4 trillion on their balance sheet over 6 years. We've done that in 6 months in 2020. Things are happening. And, I think right now, the likelihood of things getting way worse, you got Biden saying he's going to add over $2 trillion into the deficit this year with more COVID stimulus. When does it end? How does it end? And if interest rates rise, if they let it rise, God forbid, I think we are entering a period of time where gold and silver have never been more important, ever. Silver has never been more important, ever. And you can see the movement by the most sophisticated players in the world. They're telegraphing what their play is, and that is to take physical possession, get it out of harm's way, pull them off of the exchanges, and get them away from the central banks. And I guess we'll have to see how it all plays out, Bix. But yeah, physical possession has never been more important. You can see it by the movements of the biggest people on the planet.
And you guys do swaps gold for silver, correct?
We do. And when we do a gold for silver swap, we'll actually, if it's a large enough order, we'll send UPS to pick up the gold, fully insured, overnight it to us. We'll send back silver immediately, as fast as humanly possible. As I mentioned, we have a whole bunch in stock right now. We'll charge no commission on the buyback, making sure they get the highest bid price in the country on whatever they're trading, and swap them right back in to product and physically deliver it with no shipping costs immediately. In general, if someone were to send me gold eagles today, we have it picked up by UPS and to us tomorrow, I'd have it out the door within 24 to 48 hours, right back to them.
So, I mean, for you road to rooter people who have been following me, I've been jumping up and down. One, the ratio is way out of whack. Two, the amount of gold in the world we've been lied to. There's no doubt in my mind, there's not 200,000 tons that Jeffrey Christian says. It's more like 5 or 10 times that. And I think that will play into the gold silver ratio, but you don't even need that. You don't even need that. You need to understand how it's coming out of the ground, how it's used. I mean, silver is consumed and gold is just stuck back into the ground. There is no reason in my mind to hold physical gold other than it comes in a smaller package. When silver goes up 1-to-1 with gold, there goes that argument. So I have been a huge advocate of swapping all my gold for silver. I've done it. I tell all my Road to Ruta people at these crazy ratios, there's just no reason to hold gold when you can hold physical silver. And one of these days, one of these hedge funds who's big into gold is going to discover that, and then you're not going to get a chance to do it anymore. So
well, I mean, just ask yourself that question. How can one of one of the things I really like about Keith Newmeyer, I've gotten to know him over the years speaking at the Sprott conferences. He's a great guy. And one of the things I like the most about him is that he's one of the few CEOs of a mining company that's not a geologist. He's a businessman, and a damn good one. And, ask yourself this question. How the hell can any company pull something out of the ground, produce it at 8-to-1 when it's being sold at 72-to-1? It's an anomaly. And that's one of the traits of the last several years is anomalies in price due to the distortions and the manipulations by easy money and low interest rates by the Fed. And you're seeing anomalies. And I think this is one that they're trying to misdirect the public through price and rhetoric. You're one of the few people, you and Chris Marcus and David Morgan, who stand up and scream, silver is the place to be. And I believe it in my soul on many, many, many levels. And I think this is the year it will really accentuate, because you're beginning to see a drawdown in COMEX inventory by the big money. You're beginning to see massive accumulation by the commercial banks. And now the central banks are buying it. India and China, there's just not enough silver to go around. And that's why it's so important for them to suppress the price and manipulate the price to keep everyone from crowding them out of a trade that very quickly could be crowded out of, until they get to a point where there's no bid. When they have so much and no one is willing to sell it, they'll let it run. You can see that by the positioning of it. Why would a company like JP Morgan waste their time by accumulating silver, getting bad publicity, receiving Justice Department criminal fines, only to waste their time on something that was a arcane relic of days gone by? That's not the case. In fact, there's 500 ounces of silver just about in the tip of every Tomahawk cruise missile. Silver is needed everywhere, from batteries to military to water purification to solar panels. And if we see this new Green New Agenda, now that the Senate has been swept, and Biden starts to make solar panels and battery-powered vehicles not just interesting, but also a mandate, you'll see a deficit situation of 300+ million this year. That'll be peanuts compared to what we see next year. And that's really the point, is that how is it that something is trading at half of its all-time 1980 value 40 years ago, but over the last 2 years, 500 million ounces have been shortfall in comparison to demand? It does not make sense. That's what you're trying to say to people so eloquently, is that the fundamentals are incredible for gold and silver. And I'd like for silver, excuse me. I have a bad habit of saying, because I've been at this for so long, when I say gold, I mean silver as well. Let's just talk about silver. The fundamentals couldn't be better, period, 100%. And, I think that before this is all said and done, the market will define itself by the inability to source product. Over the past couple of weeks, I've noticed that the premiums are beginning to rise again. Now, I don't know if that means we're going to see supply shortages, but I do believe that over the last week or two, premiums are beginning to rise again on silver coins. And that's usually the precursor to difficulty sourcing product. And it's a very, very thin market, Bix. And so telling your people to get it and get it in their possession now is a very good idea, because I've seen many times where the snap of a finger, what is abundant and available isn't. Last March was a good example. Now, of course, that was COVID related and supply chain related, but who's to say we're out of the woods? I don't know. I just think that this market will identify itself by difficulty getting product, because, we're beginning to see an expansion of the mainstream coming into this marketplace. And it doesn't take a whole lot of demand to wipe out supply if you think the silver market is thin, the silver bullion market is the epitome of thin. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2021. I am dead sure and dead certain of that.
Hey, I want everybody to write down this date, January 11th, 2021. Write down the price of silver today is what, 24.50, $25, something to that effect. I want everybody.
25 and a quarter. It's come back a little bit today.
So let's just say $25. You're going to look back on this. Let's just say you send Andy an email, andy@milesfranklin.com, and you buy silver. I want you to come back to this video in the next 6 months, in the next year. Watch this video. Watch what we were talking about. Watch how we were saying this cannot last. We feel it. I've been in this 20 years. You've been in it probably longer than that because your family's
30.
in it. And
30.
and we feel it that the end of manipulation is around the corner on every front. I feel it in my bones. It is the way to move forward. You can't move forward with a price suppression scheme for literally 170 years since the opium wars. They've been rigging the silver price, but we are there. You didn't have to study this for 20 years. We're giving you the benefit of what we've been doing. If you're gonna swap gold for silver, do it immediately. I think that's the biggest play of all. Is everybody who has any gold should be swapping it for silver just because of all the things that we talked about. And Andy can do that for you. Send him an email again, Andy, ANDY @MILESFRANKLIN.com, and do it fast. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 9 days. I have a feeling that the good guys are going to win this battle, which means chaos in all markets. So make it happen as soon as you can. I'm going to post this as fast as possible on the Road to Ruta YouTube channel and then send out emails to everybody. Andy, any last words?
Yeah, I've talked about this before with you, Bix. I just want to, for your listeners who are new to your channel, and I get a lot of people who say, I just signed up with Bix. And so your list and your influence is expanding, and God bless you for that. I mean it. You're a shining light in a dark world, and we need more people like you. The reason we're not online, in my opinion, this industry is being attacked by state-sponsored hackers. And there are a lot of big online companies. I'm not going to mention names. Two of the biggest in the industry were hacked over the last few years, one last year in 2020 and one the year before. I decided because of that to be offline. That doesn't mean that our prices won't be as competitive as anything you'll find in the United States. Our selection as good as anything you'll find in the United States, but your privacy is something that will be intact. You will not be hacked. We do everything the old-fashioned way. We're licensed and bonded in the state of Minnesota, the only state in the United States that requires that in a federally non-regulated industry. Very important. In this precious metals industry, in the last half a dozen years, you've seen 4 or 5 of the biggest online companies go belly up, and all of that money, north of $200 million, gone forever. I would just like your listeners to know, a lot of your listeners are very tech savvy. They're involved in cryptocurrencies. They understand computers. They understand technology. And so they're used to doing things online. I believe that precious metals, very similar to what you're saying, just as much as it's important to have it offline and your crypto off the exchanges, I like to have all of our dealings offline. We're old school. We're licensed. We're bonded. We've done this for 30 years. We're one of only 27 companies ever approved by the U.S. Mint. Never had a customer complaint, ever, or a regulatory complaint, ever. And my relationship with people like you means everything to me, which means I will go to the ends of the earth to make sure your people are treated the right way and never come back to you with a comment saying, why did you recommend this guy? It's very important to me. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for trusting me. I'll never let you down or your listeners. And it just means a lot to me, Bix. I wish you and your family nothing but the very best in health and happiness and prosperity in 2021. We're in this boat together, but God bless you. Seriously, man, seriously, for doing what you do. Every day you work harder than anyone I know, 2, 3, 4 posts a day, shining light in a world where information and journalistic integrity is dying. Mm-hmm. And if it weren't for people like you and a few others that are important to me, I think it would be much harder to do my job and much harder for people out there to protect themselves. So keep doing what you're doing. I'll always represent your customers as if they're my family, your listeners. Please call me, send me an email, and I look forward to continuing these conversations whenever you'll have me, whenever you want a little bit of info from what's going on in the physical side. I keep track of what you're doing every day. So Keep
Excellent.
doing what you're doing. I can tell you it matters.
All right. Hey, thank you, Andy, and we will talk to you very soon.
All the best to you, Bix.